This is Series 3 of Away, a podcast for anyone exploring 12-step sobriety. I'm your host, Steph Roberts. Hello, my listeners, my secular listeners, my atheist or agnostic listeners, my believer listeners who just want a different perspective because they're open-minded. Seems a rare attribute lately. Okay, so I was looking over the series episode numbers, and I really have no idea. I feel like I skipped episode 7, but did 2 episode 10s. So we're going to call it episode 11 and leave it there of series 3. And we're on step 9 in the 12 and 12. Oh, the steps. I've gone over them so many times in the podcasts and all the series that I'm ready to move on to the traditions, which are typically where people think are boring, but actually, like, there's a lot of history behind them, so it might be fun to do that, like make it a little more interesting, to understand the glue that has held AA together and why it has succeeded where other groups have failed. Anywho, we are still doing the steps. So we are on step 9. Wait, first I just want to complain for a minute. We are having, my husband and I, a really tough time financially. A lot of stuff has changed over the last year. And, I don't talk to enough people about it, really. I talk to a couple of friends. We are comfortable, and I make a comfortable living, and we own a home, which is no small thing. And really, though, that's my cat, Jack, where we stand, the best financial decision would be to sell the house. I think my husband, this is going to sound crazy, but it would be to sell the house and move to Manhattan or one of the outer boroughs, because in fact, it is a lot more expensive to live on Long Island than it is to live in the city. I had no idea until I moved out here. Anyway, there's just a lot going on with that, and I feel like I talk so much about honesty and responsibility that I kind of need to say that out loud to you guys. Like, I am sober. My actions and choices are sober. Most of the time, I am a sober adult. I have taken responsibility. And what comes with responsibility is some anxiety over things like finances. And I don't have an attitude of whatever will be, will be, especially because I'm an atheist, I believe everything is a choice. And so, there's anxiety around this. And I am a privileged person, but that does not mean that my problem is not big to me. And I also understand that there are people who would probably envy me for this problem, wish they had this problem. And, I've had different, bigger problems than this over the years, but it's just, it's not exactly where I expected to be at 41, and I was hoping to sort of be out of financial chaos by this age, especially because I have, in the past 9 years of sobriety, made a lot of great choices and a lot of changes. And, is there blame to assign? Sure. Would it help to assign it and get angry about it when there's little that can be done to change the financial situation itself? No. I don't want to waste my energy. I am happy in so many ways. Having a fight about this stuff doesn't help. I learned that growing up. My parents fought a lot about money, and I vowed never to get that fearful around it and never to let it affect any relationship. And, my husband has been very, very comfortable, and now I am the one earning. And were it not for our, it's not a lavish lifestyle at all, but were it not for the expenses associated with living out on Long Island, we would have a very comfortable life. So, I'm thinking a lot about that. And moving. And I think it's a terrifying prospect for him. So it's not a decision or choice we take lightly. And it certainly isn't something that's going to happen immediately. Remortgaging is financially not the best choice in many ways, but it also buys us some time to make decisions. So it may be emotionally and mentally the right choice, which, is sometimes more important to stay calm and centered and have some time to figure things out. Anyway, I don't know. I also have my period, so everything is affecting me more than it normally would. I am someone who gets really bad this from hormones, and everything feels bigger and worse, so I'm trying to keep it in perspective and not cry constantly. And it's not crying. I don't even know, because I've got so much. I guess I'm just sad that, I know I think a lot in the future, not crazy, just I'm very pragmatic in the way I think. And so I think many steps ahead of what will need to be done. And that actually makes my life much calmer in general. But it also means I have, I've been on the planet 41 years. I've made bad decisions. I've made good decisions. I know what the picture is. And it is, it's fine. It's just, look, any change is hard, I think, and is scary. And I'm just surprised by my upset. I don't usually worry this much about anything these days. But it's just at the top of my mind. So I am blathering about it. And when I say it's because I blather so much about honesty and responsibility, it's because I think I owe listeners some truth that, life is not all rainbows and butterflies. But we have a friend, Bob, out here who says, life is not all Skittles and blowjobs. I love that. He's a brilliant guy. He's got Huntington's and, suffers a lot. And, man, he stays sober. He's got a lot on his plate, and he stays sober, and he inspires other people. So that's where it's at, guys. No matter what life throws at you, small or big problems, yes, you can. There is a way. Okay. Enough about me. I'm sorry that was such a narcissistic, selfish rant. My cat Jack won't be quiet. Step 9. Here we go. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So obviously that follows on step 8. Such people being the people we have listed in step 8 in our definitely, maybe, never columns. Direct amends means just that, directly apologize. It means apologize. You hear people say living amends, which is not really in the book at all, or in this book, but it is an idea I really like, especially when you're unable to make direct amends. And we'll get to what injure really means a little further on. Let's read. Good judgment, a careful sense of timing, courage, and prudence, these are the qualities we shall need when we take step 9. Okay. All true. Prudence, if you don't know, means cautiousness. I think the word honesty could be included here. Honesty. What do I mean with honesty in step 9? Not just honesty going into the apology, but I think you need to really believe what you're saying. I don't think this step is just about saying I'm sorry at all. It's about knowing why you should be sorry. Why should you be sorry? And experiencing at least a little real remorse. I mean, I just mean it when you say it. If you don't mean it, don't say it yet. Wait till maybe you mean it. Words are complete garbage without sincerity. And without sincerity, there won't even be any real push within you to do better and not just say the words, right? So feeling a little bit of remorse, like I always say, let shame be a motivator, not shame in its worst form, but like let that remorse be a motivator for you to change not just your words, not right, but your actions. Okay, skip down the page a little. There will be those who ought to be dealt with just as soon as we become reasonably confident that we can maintain our sobriety. Okay. So you'll hear some people say, if you don't do that, you'll drink. You know I hate the death sentence. That's ridiculous. Absolutely not. But if you're not ready, don't do it. Like we said in the last episode. I also hear people say that this step is all about you. It's about you staying sober. Kind of like they talk about sponsorship. It's all about you. And yeah, it helps you to help others. And it helps you to act in unselfish ways. It boosts your self-esteem. But this is also about other people. And I'm making this clear because there are some stupid people who take this to mean that all I need to do is say I'm sorry. As long as I say I'm sorry, I'll stay sober. And my feeling is that's not enough. I mean, I just think shitty people say this, right? Some people take this to mean, and what I think the writers probably meant, is letting go of anger and asking for forgiveness are necessary to contented sobriety and ultimately to contented life, a better life. Jack, stop. That is smart. And in my experience, that is very true. That giving forgiveness and asking for forgiveness, admitting our faults and mistakes and wrongs, and also forgiving those same things in other people, because being a hypocrite isn't great. I think that's important to a happy life. You know, it is harder to stay sober if you're unhappy, sure. But this is, again, there's no like, you will drink and die if. It is a suggestion I make strongly. The way Bill phrases his stuff here and in the big book, I think leaves a lot to be desired, because it is really easy to see why some shitty people choose to read it as a totally selfish thing. This is where the gray area around the word injure comes in, but we'll get to that soon. I think, quote unquote, those who ought to be dealt with as soon as possible are just the people in your yes, of course column from step 8. Even if there are some glaring ones in the maybe column or the never column. Okay. Oh, I'm sniffling so much. I'm sorry. Moving on to the next page. We usually want to sit down with some member of the family and readily admit the damage we have done by our drinking. Almost always we want to go further and admit other defects that have made us hard to live with. God, he's a terrible writer. This will be a very different occasion and in sharp contrast with those hangover mornings, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, sure, there is like an excitement. Once I knew how much harm I'd done to someone I loved and who had done almost nothing to deserve it, I wanted to run straight to her and make every apology and every promise I could, especially if I thought I knew, she would love it and accept it. So the first thing is, no matter how well you know someone, you don't know if they will love it and accept it. You just don't. You can't. We never fully know what's going on in other people's heads. We just don't. As much as we think we do, we just don't. And maybe you don't really want to know what's going on in the other person's head immediately. So the approach, I think, and the writers clearly think, should always be very careful and thoughtful. Because remember, it is not just about you. I think my experience has shown that you should come into every direct amends not just ready to say I'm sorry, but ready to listen. Okay, let's skip down the page. They say much the same thing here. We may not want to say anything for several weeks or longer. First, we will wish to be reasonably certain that we are on the AA beam. And this is, I think, their rationale, or it's my rationale, since I do agree, is that because you may not get the reaction you expect or want, you kind of need to feel ready for that, like to know you can accept. Like if the person you're approaching won't accept your apology or wants to rehash bad old times or yells at you or screams at you or cries, you kind of have to feel confident that that won't trigger you, that your sobriety is strong enough, that it won't throw you off the wagon. Now, my judgmental self thinks if you're really ready to get sober and you're really invested in this process and you know in your heart this is what you want for yourself, then someone yelling at you shouldn't throw you off the wagon, right? Just like they say don't date in early sobriety. And sure, don't date in early sobriety because it just makes everything harder, like if things go wrong. That said, I really don't think if you're in it to win it, I don't think a date gone awry or a couple of dates gone awry is going to throw you that off. It'll just make it harder to stay sober. But again, that whole death sentence thing, like these are suggestions to make the early days easier so that you don't have to deal with a lot of extra emotions because you'll already have plenty. And rejection is tough, man, sober or not. Okay, skipping down the page. The generous response of most people to such quiet sincerity will often astonish us. Even our severest and most justified critics will frequently meet us more than halfway on the first trial. This atmosphere of approval and praise is apt to be so exhilarating as to put us off balance by creating an insatiable appetite for more of the same. Or we may be tipped over in another direction when in rare cases we get a cool or skeptical reception. This will tempt us to argue or to press our point insistently. Maybe it will tempt us to discouragement and pessimism. But if we have prepared ourselves well in advance, such reactions will not deflect us from our steady and even purpose. So that's what I'm saying. After taking this preliminary trial at making amends, we may enjoy such a sense of relief that we conclude our task is finished. We will want to rest on our laurels. The temptation to skip the more humiliating and dreaded meetings that still remain may be great. We will often manufacture plausible excuses for dodging these issues entirely, or we may procrastinate. I think this is just, you know yourself. Are you keeping someone on the never list because you'll feel too humiliated? So you hear it a lot. Check your motives on holding off. I'm telling you from my own experience that you can handle rejection or humiliation, that it is uncomfortable, but it is not deadly. As soon as we begin to feel confident in our new way of life and have begun, by our behavior and example to convince those about us that we are indeed changing for the better, it is usually safe to talk in complete frankness with those who have been seriously affected, even those who may be only a little or not at all aware of what we have done to them. The only exceptions we will make will be cases where our disclosure would cause actual harm. So, those maybes and those nevers. And maybes and nevers may be because they'll reject you, or you've let them down so many times they won't trust you. So my experience again, and what I've sort of told every sponsee, is start just by living a sober life, doing the next right thing. Your behavior over a longer period of time is what will prove it more anyway, right? Actions speak louder than words. So if someone sees that you have changed your behavior and the way you carry yourself through life, they may be more apt to accept your apology later, once they have sort of proof, so to speak, that you're actually in it this time, that you're not just talking a good game again. That's not true for all of us. Some of us haven't let people down to that extreme. I certainly did. I let a lot of people down. And there are some people in my life who never forgave me. Part of what I try to do now, and I do it imperfectly, is be a really good friend to my close friends. And I only have a few close friends. I'm not someone who likes to have a big group of close friends, quote unquote close, whatever. That's not my thing. Okay. Lead by example. Next page. There can only be one consideration which should qualify our desire for a complete disclosure of the damage we have done. This is to someone who it may harm. This will arise in the occasional situation where to make a full revelation would seriously harm the one to whom we are making amends, or, quite as important, other people. So this is, of course, very true and very important. Bill goes on to use affairs, philandering as the example, but that's fair too. I mean, there is no need to bring the person with whom you were cheating into it. It is your fault, not his or hers. Your spouse may not see it that way, but there's no need to punish this other person for your problems. So, you may give details, but maybe you leave out other names. That's one way you could injure others. It's not you alone can dictate what can and cannot be talked about. Don't go into any apology or conversation thinking you have control over what can and cannot be talked about, right? That's out of your control at the moment. I see that a lot. I think more with men, but here's my apology, here's what I'm willing to talk about, and I'm not, this is off the table, and that's not cool. But, sometimes every detail, the name of the person with whom you were engaging in funny business, that's maybe not necessary. Because who knows? People react differently to that stuff. So basically, I crossed out the next paragraph. I am kind of rigidly righteous about, I'll rate it, I guess. Many a razor-edged question can arise in other departments of life where the same principle is involved. Suppose, for instance, that we have drunk up a good chunk of our firm's money, whether by borrowing or on a heavily padded expense account. Suppose that this may continue to go undetected if we say nothing. Do we instantly confess our irregularities to the firm in the practical certainty that we will be fired and become unemployable? Are we going to be so rigidly righteous about making amends that we don't care what happens to the family and home? So, this seems like a very extreme example to me, and I feel like I would be kind of rigidly righteous if you've been stealing from your company. I think it'd probably be pretty important to come clean, but to work out some kind of agreement wherein you pay them back and then they give you a good recommendation, something. There's another way than to just cover up the lie continuously, because that can be very uncomfortable to live with. I wonder if that guy in our group is comfortable living with his assault. Oh, I saw this thing. Did I already say this in the last one? If someone brings up, it was one of those things, I think I did bring it up, and it was a meme on Instagram or whatever. If someone brings up your past indiscretions, tell them, Jesus dropped the charges. Well, bully for you. I still live with some of the guilt, shame, and remorse of my mistakes, and I think that's okay. I think that makes me a better person. Sorry. Anyway, so I think you lose the job. I think that's part of the deal if you've been stealing from your company. It kind of sounds to me like one of Bill's pals had trouble like this. But it does make a good point. Don't rush in. Weigh all the elements and know what you are willing to give up in order to make things right. I once made a huge mistake at work that involved money, and it was an honest mistake, and it didn't benefit me even. I was messed up, like not drunk at the time I made the mistake, but it was a bad period of my life. When I discovered the mistake, I was absolutely terrified. I presented it very honestly to my boss, and I offered to resign when I presented the problem. Now, I have a very kind boss who did not take me up on that and worked with me to figure out how to fix the mistake. But I knew what I was willing to give up. And this was, still drinking, but I couldn't live with trying to cover up a mistake like that. So it did work out for me. Being honest, coming with a solution in place, like if you were stealing from your company, you might tell the truth, but also come with a solution in place. I can pay it back over the course of whatever it is, 24 months at $100 a month. I would be grateful if you would accept that and provide me with a good reference because I've now been sober, blah, blah, blah. I'm working. Right. That would be my suggestion. It is hard to live, I think. It should be hard to live with theft. I mean, this guy in our group another guy who stole like more than $30,000 from the group. Now he's found Jesus. Jesus dropped the charges. Like, really? So you don't have any shame around that? It's shocking. That's shocking. And to me, like, finding Jesus isn't enough of a living amends, right? It just isn't. And a living amends means living your life differently, especially in light of the fact that you won't be able to apologize to everybody. Perhaps you've lost them. Perhaps they hate you. Whatever the reason, or perhaps they'll try to kill you. Whatever the real, true reason is for not being able to make an amends, then the best way to do it is to live a different life. To not completely right, but to not do the things you did to that person. So if it was being nasty, saying something nasty, then you try never to say anything really nasty to another person again. You make that a goal. I certainly make that a goal. I was very nasty to one friend many, many years ago who never forgave me. I mean, I'm sure she doesn't hold on to it. Like, it's not affecting her life, but I still feel enough remorse over that I work. I mean, it's not hard work anymore, but even if I think something nasty, I try not to say anything nasty, because I know also from personal experience that I remember almost every nasty thing that was ever said to me, while I tend to forget most of the kind things that were said to me. So if that's true of me, that's true of a lot of people. And one nasty word to someone, whatever it is, may stay with them forever and do some damage. So one of my living amends to her is to try not to be nasty. Now, you probably wouldn't guess that from this podcast. But I do have some, look, I got thoughts. All right, last page. But all of them, meaning amends, do require a complete willingness to make amends as fast and as far as may be possible in a given set of conditions. Above all, we should try to be absolutely sure that we are not delaying because we are afraid. For the readiness to take the full consequences of our past acts, that's funny after what he just said, and to take responsibility for the well-being of others at the same time is the very spirit of step 9. And I would say, life. It's not easy to take responsibility when you've been wrong or you've harmed someone. It's not easy. It kind of stinks. And sometimes in the moment, if you've done something yucky and the other person says, you hurt my feelings or whatever, even if your hackles go up, just try saying, I'm really sorry. My intention was not to hurt your feelings. My bad. So true dat. Anyway, thanks for listening to all my whatever it was, not complaining or whatever, whining, I guess. I just needed a minute to do it. Why not give it to you guys? Yeah, so I hope this was a helpful episode, and as ever, I hoped it helped you to understand that using the 12 steps, not using the 12 steps, there isn't only one way to do anything, but there is almost always a way.